Prince Andrew has appeared in the news once again in what can only be described as a royal nightmare, as his name, along with many others, have appeared in recently released court documents in a lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell, obviously in respect of Jeffrey Epstein. But what's more interesting is how this has been covered by the media. Because on the one hand, names appearing in these documents in the way that they do make them all appear guilty of very serious offences. But whilst they've all denied liability and haven't really had the opportunity to reply, none of these actually prove anything. They just appear in these documents among allegations just like any other. So you might be wondering why now and why these documents have just recently been released. Well, just like any other court case that ends up settled, we may never see those documents if they've been sealed. However, the Miami Herald, in this case here, were an intervener in this particular case against Ghislaine Maxwell by Virginia Giuffre. And these documents have now been released, and they've been scrutinised over the last few days. Now, ordinarily, referring to anyone in these documents in the way that they are referred to in these documents might amount to defamation for newspapers to print and quote. However, newspapers can report on the content of documents because these are papers that have been produced in court. They are also just claims that have been made in court. They're allegations, they are disputed, and there are arguments against them, although, as I say, the news doesn't really seem to be covering those arguments against in any great detail. And along with Prince Andrew, there are several other high-profile names that appear in these documents, including former US President Bill Clinton, Michael Jackson, David Copperfield, and Sir Richard Branson. But just because any of these names have been identified as being some sort of associate to Jeffrey Epstein does not automatically mean that they've been accused of any wrongdoing in relation to Jeffrey Epstein, despite what you might infer from some of the news articles. Some of them indeed might just be mentioned in passing within these documents, and unless you read them carefully and just saw a name appear in the headlines, you might ultimately jump to the wrong conclusion. Within the recent tranches of documents that have been unsealed, another complainant, Sarah Ransom, in her deposition, which has now been made public, she suggests that Jeffrey Epstein had procured another friend to various people around the world, including Prince Andrew, Richard Branson, and Bill Clinton. Then again, she also contradicted herself at various points, at one stage saying that there was CCTV footage in Jeffrey Epstein's possession that he planned to use in some kind of ransom. But later, when interviewed by The New Yorker, she contradicted herself and said that the CCTV footage didn't exist. She later backtracked once again and said that it did exist and that she was afraid of Jeffrey Epstein. Even Ghislaine Maxwell herself had said she doesn't know where the CCTV is. That doesn't necessarily conclusively mean that it did exist, but that if it did, she didn't know where it was. And just to be absolutely clear, a spokesperson on behalf of Richard Branson, and indeed everybody else, have denied any allegations made or implied within these papers. This has left everybody wondering, where is the CCTV, if this indeed exists, and why has it not been made public? One argument, of course, is that it might just be buried somewhere, maybe even literally. The other argument is that it doesn't exist, and if it did, it would have been made public by now. Then we come back to Prince Andrew, who, as I say, has been dragged into the news once again after he probably felt that all of these allegations against him had disappeared, although he denied them and then paid a settlement of, reportedly, in the region of £12 million to Virginia Roberts Giuffre. But now with the release of these papers, once again, it brings him back into the headlines. But as I recall, I think saying at the time, just merely paying a settlement in response to allegations doesn't automatically mean that you're guilty of those allegations. But nonetheless, that hasn't stopped various experts and correspondents saying that the king should cast Prince Andrew aside to protect the royal family's reputation. PR and reputation expert Carla Spite said that Buckingham Palace would be in danger limitation mode following the unsealing of these documents by the New York judge, and that King Charles must distance the family from Prince Andrew if the monarchy has any real chance of avoiding a backlash from the public. This, she says, is about damage limitation, continuing that these accusations about Prince Andrew have once again been thrown into the spotlight will hurt the royal family's reputation, and the only way the king might mitigate the damage is to cast his brother aside. The king should ban the Duke from any public royal events, and my advice, she says, would be to ensure Andrew does not benefit from any of the royal privileges paid for by the taxpayers. But as always, many of these things are open to interpretation. You are entitled to your own views, and you're also entitled to look at the documents which have now been made public. So leave me your thoughts and your comments respectfully, please, in the comment section below, and make sure you subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.